The first time you ate a girl out was in 1985, somewhere south of Echo Park, your first time out of the Bay since you'd arrived from Manila when you were 5. You and Jaime had more or less broken up by then, and in 3 years or so, you guys were going to go back to being what you'd been at the beginning, which was friends who'd lie down in traffic for each other, beyond family, beyond lovers, more like warriors in arms, medieval in your loyalty. By the time of the breakup, you'd known you were going to have to drop out of school. It'd never been your thing, not really. Even though you'd gone into it optimistically, some dumbass dream of becoming the American Nora Honor still hanging around in your heart. But you soon figured out that just because you majored in theater and always memorized your lines didn't mean anyone was going to give you any parts. At least not any good ones, and definitely not the leads. At best, you kept getting cast again and again as the evil witch, or as some white girl's friend with one or two kind of funny lines, or more typically as the port whore picked off right at the beginning of the play. That last one was even written by another Pinoy at San Jose State, some aspiring screenwriter who told you that you looked a little like Lea Salonga, only not as light. His play was knockoff Miss Saigon, but at least you got really good at primal screaming. Now you knew the technique of how to do it so that your vocal cords wouldn't be ripped to shreds the next day. That was the last thing you ever learned about acting. You moved backstage, where, it turned out, all the Pinay and Vietnamese kids had been hiding the whole time. That was how the makeup thing started, and to your surprise, you liked it even more than the acting. You started doing it on the side for neighborhood girls, debuts and cotillions and graduations and weddings, shit like that. Your theater hookups meant you knew where to find the professional makeup stores dotted around the Bay that sold stuff like Benai, Cryolin, mixing mediums, and you came up with workarounds like how to add yellow pigment, sometimes food coloring when you were desperate, to some pink as hell foundation a girl came bearing to you like a grail, convinced it was her shade. I think they don't make people in that shade, you replied. You liked it. Liked the feeling of being the one to put a girl's first armor on, even though sometimes, admittedly, you didn't always like the kinds of armor you were routinely asked to provide. How to shade and lift a flat Pinoy nose, how to buff shadow around an eye to make it look bigger, how to make a heavily talc paste pink blush not look like chalk on a morena's cheeks. You pushed back on some of it, got a reputation for being stubborn, but at the end of the day, you served your community. When a client wanted a white nose, you gave her a white nose. Soon enough, word got around from Milpitas to Frisco, Rosalyn Kabugao makes you look bomb. By the time you knew you were going to drop out, you were bored of the house parties, the breakdancing, hovering around while some shaved-head Moreno who used to put his hand down the front of your shirt in kindergarten DJ'd to an audience of worshipful acolytes using equipment mostly paid for by his nurse mother. When you went to LA for the first time with some theater buddies, you ended up fucking a white girl who touched your hair too much, but not in a sexy way, and kept saying, I wish I had Asian hair, it's so silky. It was your first orgasm with a girl. You faked it. Then you couldn't find your underwear on the floor, so you had to go home without it, denim chafing your ass the whole car ride from Los Angeles to Milpitas, where your theater buddies, the friends you'd been so desperate to make at San Jose State just to be able to gossip with people whose mothers didn't work with yours, spent most of the ride smirking at each other without looking at you. None of them lived in Milpitas. They dropped you off at home with promises to call and get together soon. You told Jaime. You dropped out of school. The buddies never called. But you never thought of packing it all in and moving up to Frisco. You never had any suburban angst. You liked the smallness of your world. The only negative was if there were any girls who were maybe interested in putting their faces in between your legs, you never met them. Or there was an alarmingly high possibility the girls knew your mother, your family, had eaten barbecue or sung karaoke in your grandparents' restaurant, had worked at the hospital with your mom, had their house exercised by your grandma. The gift of the small world was that it was small. The curse of the small world was that it was small. Back in the Philippines, you'd been an easily possessible kid. That was the only way of putting it. It wasn't rare for children around you to be occupied every now and then by some minor encanto. Early demon possession was more common than pneumonia, but your case was probably the worst in the barrio. If you'd grown up in another type of family, richer, college educated, then maybe you would have been put in a hospital, or sent to church, or forbidden from going outside. If you hadn't been born on stilts above Manila Bay, the homes demolished within a year of your birth, and everyone relocated to places like Santa Mesa, a concrete block along the San Juan River where Quezon City's raw sewage drifted along on its way to the Pasig, then maybe the possession thing would have become a real problem. But you were. So it wasn't. Your family and neighbors accepted with clinical detachment the existence of duende, hexes, the possibility of being fucked up from head to toe by something you couldn't see. Everyone knew what the symptoms looked like when a lowly, lonely demon with abandonment issues had a crush on you. Your grandma, the preeminent bruja of the barrio, knew most of all. She knew when the voice coming out of your throat wasn't your own. When you moaned, I feel heavy, I feel heavy. She knew how to take that foreign but familiar weight from you. She was your first doctor. The first person to tell you that you weren't special and mean it as a promise. The first person to put a cold hand on your sweating face and laugh reply to the question you mumbled into her sleeve. Of course you're gonna live, stupid. Your mom didn't want anything to do with your grandma's work, refused her inheritance of herbs and demonry, and instead dove headfirst into her destiny, the other word for which was modernity. Modern women didn't rub coconut pulp and efficacent onto their neighbors and friends. Modern women didn't negotiate child custody rights with encantos. Modern women kept studying at home even when they'd gotten pregnant just out of high school. Modern women were the only kid in the barrio smart enough to get a scholarship so they could take night classes at a nearby nursing school. Modern women let their childhood friend turn shotgun husband drink half a bottle of Ginebra, then beat them blue almost every day until their own mother had to take them aside, look them in the eye, and declare, if you don't leave him, I'll take Rosalyn and go to the States myself with or without boy's green card or your visa. And bahala ka na sa buhay mo. It was because of your grandma that you eventually got into manga. She'd been into comics growing up and gave you a bunch of her old ones from the Philippines, things like Reina Bandida, Darna, Pobrecita, old issues of Hiwaga and Especial, so old in weather the color had stripped off the covers. You'd read them religiously in Manila, kept reading them in California until you were about 10 or so. You only stopped because you had to focus on your studies, scrub your accent away, and conjugate English verbs. In high school, you tried to go back to your grandma's comics, just out of curiosity, but page after page swam in front of you, senseless, until your vision blurred and you had to shove the magazines away. Tagalog, the first language you'd ever spoken, and now you could barely read a sentence. It wasn't just reading. For years, you'd replied in English when your grandma talked to you, stopped understanding the teleseries and movies that your mom picked up at Magat along with pastillas and sampalok. Now you couldn't even read fucking comics. Not for the first time, your own mind terrified you. The careless black hole greediness of it, that you could leave things there thinking they were safe and then turn around and find that they'd been eaten away, gnawed on without mercy or honor so that not even the bones were left, destroyed nonchalantly by something mightier in you, something mightier than you, some big time fucking asshole whose name was what even? Forgetting. You could forget an entire world, the person you'd been there. It scared the shit out of you. It scared the shit out of you, but not enough to go back and try and learn it all again. Most of the time when you had the shit scared out of you, you ran. And so you ran from it, the eaten up place where your first language had been. Ran like hell. Left it for dead. You clocked Hero's hands the second time you met. Once you looked at them, really looked at them, it was pretty obvious something was fucked up there, had been fucked up for a while, probably. You'd never broken a bone in your body, but you were pretty sure that what you were looking at was old. Both numbs, gnarled up and knobbly, not just double jointed. Fucked, not like an accident. Like someone else had broken them, maybe. That didn't have to be it. Hero might have just had a bad fall sometime in the past couple of years, but 20 years on, you still remember the telltale signs of getting beat on, what that looked like on a woman. So when you saw Hero's hands, you thought the worst. What you thought at the time was the worst. Though later, as always, you'd realize that what you knew about the worst of the world, the knowledge about life you'd stored up, tart and proud because of where you'd been born, what you'd run from, what made you, all amounted to mostly nothing. Like anyone else's stupid history. It didn't make you any wiser or stronger the way you hoped, the way you usually played it. Just made you you, The other thing that bugged you out from the beginning was how Hero didn't even look like she minded being called Hero. It was a fucking ridiculous name, ridiculous even for Pinoy nicknaming standards, so ridiculous you skipped all the way past the safety of mockery into full-blown tenderness like a sucker. You should have known then that that was the beginning. Should have recognized what was in your gut, roaring up in your organs, something terminal and excruciating like the bad ending of the whore you'd been so good at playing on stage when you were 18, but you'd always been a dumbass, so... You didn't even realize what you were feeling until right after Hero and Roni left after that first meeting, and by that time, as usual, you'd already made a fool of yourself by being yourself, the way you always were with new people, hella dramatic and flirtatious, but with no real roots in it, no firm ground underneath it, the way you were with everyone. Only like a minute after Hero left the salon did you figure out that you didn't want to be the way you were with everyone, with Hero. When you offered Hero a job at the restaurant, you'd done it mostly out of solidarity, had figured out quick that Hero didn't have any papers. What you hadn't counted on was how good Hero would be at it. She had a natural knack for serving people at the restaurant, had a way of being invisible at the right times and then silently appearing to provide a fork when it was needed. Hero was detached, but her boundaries were nothing like the ones you'd thrown up in phalanxes when you were a kid, new in California, snarling at anyone who looked at you sideways because of how you pronounced the letter F. Hero was like one of those upper-class Filipino homes in the Bay that your fam catered at sometimes. The couples for Christ houses, the ones with polite owners who paid on time, called the boy kuya, took the trays off your hands. It was only after you'd been in the house a couple times that you'd wise up to the fact that you'd never really gone past the entrance. It didn't take long for you to start giving Hero stacks and stacks of manga. You didn't realize afterwards that Hero must have figured out quick that your taste generally ran towards romance, that everything you recommended to her was mainly about girls feeling out their independence, falling in love with boys who were generally either stable and responsible from beginning to end or rude as shit at first, but then juicy soft like a peach the minute the heroine ever got into some real wildness. The stories all ended the same way. Thank God for that. You knew that Hero didn't think much of your reading habits, that she found the stories sentimental and full of cliches, was possibly even offended by some of them, although she was polite about it, thanking you for the latest book, even if it had been patently obvious that she thought it was a pile of steaming tae, not good enough to spit on. Hero knew the kinds of stories you liked, which meant Hero thought she knew something about you, what you wanted out of love, what you wanted out of life, the things you dreamt about, the things you touched yourself to, the things that dragged you without protest into the undertow of dreamless, fearless sleep. She likes dumbass romance between boys and girls, so that's what she really wants. That was how Hero's thinking probably went. It felt like Hero was just waiting for the moment to come when you would just shake yourself awake from some heavy-ass dream, blink a few times at her like you didn't recognize her, and the feelings you'd been feeding and feeding off of would just vanish, like a hunger that went away the more you starved it. Better to give up and get the fuck out now, cried the biggest and smartest part of you, the part whose job it was to acutely detect when you were out of your depth, or when your dumbassness was approaching life-ruining levels. Okay, so you were out of your depth. The life ruin meter was wailing. That was all true. But it was too late. Too late to have your mind changed by something as minor as the truth. You didn't want a way out. You wanted a way in. Any way in would do. Hero knew what she was doing when it came to fucking. You saw for yourself the way Hero would go home with almost anyone who asked, those first few months when you were just friends and you had to grin and turn your head, stand around at parties up in the Excelsior and wait until someone whispered in Hero's ear. But you saw Hero leave with a girl once, at a party in San Jose, which meant it was on the table at least. Hero went home with almost anyone who asked. So you asked. It wasn't that deep. Or that was what you needed Hero to think. Less than a year later, she was letting you nose around her pussy like a teenager at prom, licking over extravagantly at folds you usually ignored on yourself, or poking shallow into Hero's hole, hoping for a reaction, not really getting one. Then Hero asked you to use your hand. I got this, you said, when you finally got your shit together, meaning, wanting it to be true so much there was no way you could ever fucking say it out loud. I got you. You pressed your middle finger down on Hero's clit. Slick, saliva warm, too wet if that was even possible. Fuck, you'd been sloppy as hell. No wonder. Enough. No time to lose it. Time to work. You pressed your middle finger down onto Hero's clit, gentle at first, the way you liked it, and started in on the familiar slow circle. Not trying anything fancy, aiming straight for the heart.